Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how I color blocked the Mandy top and dress from Sonia Estep Designs. I saw a pin that I wanted to recreate, and the Mandy was the perfect dolman style form of the dress. I just needed to add the color blocking, so I'm going to show you how I did that today, as well as adding the cuffs to the sleeves. And this is also something you can use to color block other tops and dresses as well. So let's get started. So I have my front pattern piece here. I have mine already marked for when I did my last piece. So I'm just going to show you what I did. I wanted the pinspiration I was looking to copy. I like how it had part of the sleeve, the bottom, and part of the sleeve, the top fabric. So I measured my sleeve piece, and then I did about a little over half. So it was a little over 7, but I did 5 inches. And this is, again, subjective. You can change it to however you wanted. So I measured and marked on the sleeve, and then I just went ahead and drew my line. I made sure this was lined up with the straight edge of the pattern piece so that I knew it was an even line, and I marked it across. Now you can see here, because this is a lower scoop neck than my pinspiration was, that if I do here, I'm not going to have a whole lot of room. So what I did, I just raised my neckline up when I cut mine out. So let me show you what I did. Go ahead and trace. And then I marked where I wanted the line. Okay, so I just raised mine up. I think it was about 1 inch. So I just kind of guessed where I wanted it and put a little mark. And then I started tracing the top half so that the shoulders would still be the same, and then I just curved, kind of matched the same curve shape. If you want, you could even slide your piece up to get the same curve shape and just trace the piece and then blend the lines right there. So that's it for the front piece, and then I just use my ruler to match up the 2 lines. Okay, and then what you're going to want to do is make sure you add your seam allowance so that when you join the 2 pieces together, they're still the same height overall. So what you can do I use 1/4 inch, so I just match using the 1/4 inch mark on my ruler and draw my line like that. Then we're going to go ahead and cut this out, and then we'll cut out our bottom. Okay, so for the bottom half, we're going to do the same thing except for the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and mark at the line, and then I'm going to trace my line. Now I don't want to show you the whole pattern piece out of respect for the designer, so I am not going to finish tracing all of mine right this second, so I'll just show you what I do. Now the same thing for the top, we want to add 1/4 inch seam allowance. So go ahead and put my 1/4 inch mark on the 2 marks that I made and draw that line so that we have that seam allowance so we don't lose length on our shirt or dress overall. So then you'll go ahead and finish tracing the pattern piece down to the bottom and cut that out, and then I will show you what we do next. Okay, so we have our 2 front pieces cut out. Now you could do the same color blocking for the back if you wanted. I chose just to do an accent piece on my front, so I did not color block my back. So we're going to take your shirt is right side up, and then we have our top accent piece here, and then you flip it down so that they are right sides together, and you go ahead and pin that in place. Okay, once you have that pinned, you're going to take that over to your sewing machine inserter and sew along that edge. Once you have that sewn together, then you have your front piece done, and then you should have cut out the rest of your pieces just as the pattern calls for, and you can go ahead and assemble like normal. Because we took off we raised our neckline, that means our neck opening is going to be shorter, so we're going to have to take some off of our neckline. So you could do two things. You could assemble your shirt, front and back bodices, and then measure your neck opening and do about 85%. On mine, I just kind of estimated, since I raised it about an inch on the fold, I just took about an inch, so off the neckband. So instead of putting the fabric on the fold, you just take it about an inch off and mark your new line. So not as accurate, but it's going to be pretty close. Or you can, like I said, go ahead and just assemble the shirt and then measure your neck opening, and then take about 85% of that, and then don't forget to add your seam allowance to that. The pin I wanted to recreate with my dress also had cuffs, so I'm going to show you how I measure for cuffs, since the pattern includes a hemmed option. So if you want cuffs, just grab a tape measure and go ahead and measure your sleeve opening. Mine's about 7 1/4 inches. And I'm going to multiply that times 2 because I have 2 sides of the sleeve cuff. And then I'm going to do about 90% because I don't want my cuffs super tight. So do them at 90%, which is a little over 13 inches. So I'm going to cut them at 13.5, for that way it includes my 1/4 inch seam allowance to sew them in the round. So I'm going to cut 2 sleeve cuffs at 13.5 inches long, and then the width again is up to you. I'm going to cut mine about 2.5 wide, I think, so that they end up about an inch wide once they're sewn on. But again, you could make that longer if you wanted a bigger cuff. That is up to you. Alright, I'm also going to show you, on this one I'm going to add a waistband instead of hemming. I'm a little bit taller, so when I cut my pattern piece, I just cut it at the shirt line instead of adding length. Some patterns I need to add a little length to, depending on where they hit on my hips, because I carry most of my weight in my hips. So sometimes I will change the length of the pattern so it hits at the most flattering spot on me. So for this one, I just cut it at the shirt line because I wanted it a little bit longer. If you wanted it at the intended fit, you could cut off about 2.5 inches off the bottom of your pattern when you were cutting it out, and then you would make that up in the length of the band. But I wanted a longer fit than intended, so I'm just going to go ahead and add my band to the shirt length. So same thing, just measure, flatten it out and measure across, a little over 24 inches times 2, so it gives us 48 inches. Again, for my waistbands, I usually do about 90%, so about 43 inches, a little over 43 inches, so I'll probably cut at 43.5, just to add a little extra for my seam allowance. And that'll be my waistband. I like to cut my waistband between 6 and 7 inches wide. A lot of times I'll do 6.5 because I have a 6.5 inch quilting ruler, so super easy just to trace both sides of that. Alright, so I usually cut my bands on the fold. Since I was just using up the last scrap of this print, I don't actually have enough to cut my waistband as one piece. So I just divided it in half, so I'm going to cut 2 pieces both on the fold, so they're going to be almost 11 inches, and then I'll sew them together before attaching them to my shirt. So I will take these and open them both up and place them right sides together, and then I will go ahead and sew both short ends together. And I'm going to cut out my arm bands the same way on the fold here. Same thing, I'm going to go ahead and sew these short ends together. So I have my shirt here, and I've sewn the short end of my bands and cuffs together. So now I'm going to go ahead and flip it so that the wrong sides are together and the raw edges are matched up. And I'm going to go ahead and pin that inside of my shirt bodice, matching up the side seams. Once I have both side seams pinned in place, I am just going to go ahead and stretch the waistband to fit the shirt. Since I did 90%, I'm not going to have to stretch a ton. We're going to pin the cuffs into the sleeve the same way, folding them right sides together. I like to match my seam to the side seam. And I'm going to go ahead and just stretch that to fit the opening. Okay, and then once you have all of those pinned in, you can go over to your sewing machine and sew them on. There are a couple things you can do for the tie depending on your fabric. I was using a double brush poly, so I was being super lazy and did the easiest, quickest way possible, so I will show you that. And then I also show you how to make a tie for any sort of knit fabric that you have. I used just the width of my fabric, which was 54 inches or so. So I'm not gonna cut out the whole thing. I'm just gonna do a small one to show you an example. So if you want to do this, if you're using like a double brush poly and want to do the super lazy way, you can just cut out a strip. I did mine maybe a little over an inch wide. Okay. And double brush poly tends to curl in on itself, and I was using a solid print, so I literally just stretched it and it curled itself into a string. So if you're doing a solid color and it's double brush poly, you could literally just cut a strip and pull it and it curls in on itself. But if you're doing a print or another fabric that does not curl in on itself like that, you might want to do about 1.5 inches. Again, this is depending on your preference, and again, you would go the whole width of the fabric and you would just pin that long edge together. Okay, all the way down, and then you would go ahead and sew that edge. So once you've sewn along that long edge, you're going to want to turn that right side out. So there are a couple things you can do. You can get one of these little fabric turning gadgets, has a little hook on the end. You can thread that through to the other end and then catch the fabric in the hook and then just slide it over itself so that it's right side out, and then you can go ahead and tie that around and you have a little belt. The other thing you can do if you don't have one of those, and I think I just got this one on Amazon, you could just use a safety pin and go ahead and pin it onto the end and then use the safety pin and guide it through the tube, sliding the fabric over itself to turn it. And you just gotta work it a little bit at a time until you get it all the way through to the other end. you go. That's another way that you can turn it. And then you have yourself a belt. So once you have sewn on your bands and or hemmed your sleeves and your bottom, you are done, and you have a awesome basic fitting shirt that has something just a little extra and fun, and is also a great way to use scraps.